Hi class, I hope you're well. In this freebie, I want to continue on exploring some literary features of Genesis. And for this one, I want to look at characterization and irony, examples of characterization and irony in the book of Genesis, specifically in the Joseph cycle. Um, Two things I want to look at specifically in literature is the characterization. I did say the characterization and irony. I will first look at characterization in Joseph, and I want to look at character development. Now, when you're reading a narrative like throughout the book, maybe like I don't know Genesis or Exodus or even uh, all the books of Samuel or both books of Samuel and so on, it's good to look to pay attention to the development of a character. Sometimes they change over time. Sometimes they become a bit more regress in a way spiritually. Otherwise, they progress. And I will look at Joseph. Want to look at Joseph here. I'm being very selective in my verses. You will know the story because you're working through it. Just looking at Genesis 37:2, it says, "This is the account of Jacob's family line." Now we're getting to Joseph. Joseph, a young man, was a young man of 17, was tending the flock with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. He was a tattletale. This is the opener. Immature young Joseph. Then I want to look at two scenes here from where he gets the dreams and just see there's something in here of him being full of himself. Joseph had a dream, verse 5. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. They hated him because he was the favorite son. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, and when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around him, mine, and bowed down to it. So then, of course, they get angry at him, they hate him even more, and then later on, he has another dream. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and in this dream, the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. And everybody understood that's a sign of him that ruling over his brothers and his parents now as well. And they get that and they understand that, and you can tell in their reaction. But I want to take you, of course, a couple of years, 13 years go by. Joseph has seen great difficulty in Egypt, quite adverse effects, and just when it comes here in 31, I just want to look at the way he sort of became humble and softened up. It struck me when I read this again recently in 41. When Pharaoh has the dream, and then he hears about Joseph from the cupbearer, and he has Joseph fetched. We read here from verse 14. I just want to look at Joseph's own words here. It's the best way of a characterization, or it's a very good characterization of a person, of a character in the narrative, to look at their words. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. And then, of course, Pharaoh tells the dream, and Joseph gives the interpretation. It says about the 7 years of abundance and the 7 years of lack. And then in verse 33, Joseph now gives advice in light of the dream. He says, "And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine, that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by famine. Now, I just at the start, it says, let Pharaoh appoint look for a discerning and wise man to put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Now, this would be a good point for young Joseph to say, now, let me tell you about this dream I once had, and about this promise from God and this gifting. But he doesn't say that. He just says someone should do it. And then going on Pharaoh's own word, the plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man? One in whom the Spirit of God, one in whom is the Spirit of God." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Just a change of, and of course later you get even with his brothers, and it's known. So I didn't want to zoom in on that when he forgives his brother at the end. The brothers at the end of the book. Um, there's even greater is a forgiveness there. But here, just a characterization change of showing of realizing of his own inabilities. Next, I also just want to look at the story of irony in the story of Judah and Tamar. Now, let me just give some background here. What happened with Judah is he had three sons, and Tamar married the oldest one, and he was wicked. And then the second, so he died. And then the second brother was supposed to raise up children for the first brother, but he didn't do that, and so he died as well. And now Judah's afraid because his sons keep dying when they get involved with Tamar. So he says to Tamar, "I'm sorry, now I don't have another son, or the third one is too small. Please just go to your father's house and live there as a widow, and we'll see how things go from there. Or when he's grown up, you can be given, he'll be given to you." But he doesn't do that because he's afraid. And I think there's a couple of points of irony. Irony is just humor, things being not as you thought they would be. Some of the characters being, you get different kinds of irony, and I won't get into the technical detail of that, but you get different kinds of irony, and a couple of them can be seen in this book, in this story. So I'll just read it. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went to Timnah to the man who was shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira the Adullamite went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance of Enaim, which is on the way to Timnah. Here, for she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as wife. I should just say something here. For her, it would have been a horrible existence of shame, the life she was living then. For a widow is, yeah, at very low social standing, and also because she didn't have children, she also had even less standing. And the idea there was that the brother raises up a child for his older brother, or for the other brother. It could have been an older brother for a younger brother as well, and then they could inherit. That son would be counted as the deceased brother's son, and they could inherit in their thing. So she's in a terrible social state at this moment. Great shame that was being brought on her, and Judah's keeping it in that state. So just for a bit of background. Then moving on. When Judah saw her now sitting, just outside the town, he thought that she was a prostitute. There's two important words here, and I think the Hebrew would have helped one here. Um, but this word is a very particular word, prostitute, which means someone who commits sexual immorality, but also, I mean, the profession here. She was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." Very, very sort of brazen, very. Anyway, and she said, "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. So again, very also straightforward, very to the point replies both. Then they make an agreement. He says, "I'll give you a goat." She said, "But you don't have a goat." So he says, "No, I'll give you these things." It's just sort of almost like a credit card. These things that he will be known by. He's yeah, his wallet almost. So going on from here. So then, there was some PG activity there, some censored activity, and then in verse 20, meanwhile Judah sent the goat back, sent the young goat by his friend the Edolamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he did not find her. The Edolamite now, Hiram, he couldn't find her. He asked the men who lived there. It's very polite language here. This is also a bit of irony here. Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road to Enaim? Now this word is a totally different word, which refers to, as it were, in some of the religions at that time, not in Israel, but in the Canaanite religions, there was shrine prostitute. I won't get into detail of that. I think you can imagine. But so this is a totally different word. He makes it a religious thing, which it wasn't. And then he says there. Now the guys, the men reply, say, there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. They said. So he went back to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here. Now, I'm not sure if he told Hiram as well that it was a shrine prostitute or whether Hiram was in on it. But either way, there was not a shrine prostitute. The text, the narrator says he thought it was a prostitute. And then verse 23. Then Judah said, now there's better tension as it builds up the text, and we're going to see more tension just in the following verses. But there's a bit of irony here in the embarrassment of Judah, and even the embarrassment of Hiram. You can see him, he asks, where's the shrine prostitute? They say there is none, and he backs away quite awkwardly, I think. Then Judah said, let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughing stock. After all, I did send this young goat, but you didn't find her. And I just then leave it. However, we read later in verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution. Same route as the one he actually when he went out and saw her. And as a result, she is now pregnant. Judah said, again, the irony, the tension builds here. Bring her out and have her burned to death. And she was being brought out. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. I am pregnant by the man who owns these, she said. And she added, see if you recognize whose seal, cord, and staff these are. And then Judah was trapped. There's no way out of it. And it's just really irony, and then it resolves in him owning up to what he did, and realizing that he made a mistake. Judah recognized them and said, she is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah. And he did not sleep with her again. That was Judah with Tamar. Again, just a sort of a restoration or a restitution here, rather, of the great shame that he has subjected Tamar to. And I just thought to point out the irony in the text. It's just interesting, these little things. If you know to look for them and can look out for them, then you can enjoy the text more. So in this post, I've just looked a bit at some characterization or character development, also irony in some of the Joseph cycle narratives. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope you have a nice day. Goodbye.